All right. Well, I think we're right at the hour here, so let's get started. So I'll kick things off today. First, I just wanted to, thank you all for coming. Hope everyone is, you and your families are all doing well and in good health right now. We're doing these kinds of things. We did a webinar earlier in the week, which I'm sure some of you were on, and really good Q&A at the end of that. And we were trying to think of, how can we help in this, in this time. And, really honestly, we've never done this sort of kind of open forum, kind of community conversation, Q&A type of thing. So bear with us. We're just kind of trying this and figuring it out. You've got, Ruth and myself and Gabe, all from TeamGenius. Ruth also represents her company Go, who does, consulting and, facilitation for sports organizations, leadership and does some great work there. So, we are not trying to position ourselves as the one-stop shop for any sports question or expertise, but we certainly are all in this space and we'll do our best to help. But, even better is, I'm sure you're all trying to navigate your way through this and your clubs and your coaches and your finances and players and all of those things. So we hope that, we can all learn a bit from each other, that we can, pass on and just kick some ideas around and hear what's on your mind. And, we won't be able to answer everything necessarily, but hopefully the ideas we can share across the group are useful for everyone. So I think that's kind of it on the ground rules. As far as logistics goes, we did this in sort of a webinar format, so you're all muted by default, and we kind of wanted to, to try to manage just the number of people, not a crazy number here. We've got, what is this, maybe 8 or 9, and then, the 3 of us. But just to kind of keep things orderly, we're going to try, at least at first, if you have a question, you should see a raise hand feature on your screen. It should be right. Where is it? I'm actually looking at a different view than you, but I think it's on the kind of on the bottom pane. You should see a raise hand feature. So we encourage you to use that, and then I have control here, and I can just hit allow to talk or unmute, and you can ask your question, or just as valuable or encouraged is responding to someone else's question or topic. So we do have a couple of questions that were submitted ahead of time, and we had a couple ideas for topics, but we kind of were hoping that, the group here could drive that a little bit. So I think before we jump in, so if you're all, please think of a question or think of something you'd like to talk about. I'm sure you have already. While we're getting going, would everyone just mind maybe popping in the chat and throwing in the organization that you're with? And of course, if you have a question, that's a good place to throw your question as well. So just take a minute and put in the organization you're with, and everyone can skim through those and understand, who's on the call here today. I think, I definitely recognize a lot of the names here. Great. So Carol from Galway Rovers, Brian, Staten Island Soccer Club, Rob, Next Level, Gary from AIM Soccer Club, Jeff from Sporting Columbus, or Jeffrey. Excellent. So I know we've got, a few customers on the call and quite a few others who are not currently customers. So I think just one other thing I want to point out too is if you have really specific, TeamGenius account related questions that might, take a little more time to answer, we might want to take those offline. So feel free to, throw it in the chat, and we can make a note to follow up with you. Otherwise, Gabe at teamgenius.com is a good place to to go for that stuff right now. We're trying to help our customers as much as possible. So if there's any, you want to have a conversation, kind of one-on-one, we're happy to do that as well. So, well, great. So I see, we've got a good mix of people here. Let's start with some questions. Does anyone want to kind of volunteer a topic or a question? Feel free to either hit the raise hand and I can have you kind of verbalize and explain, or if you'd rather throw it in the chat, we can read it there and try to respond that way. So I'll just give everybody a minute here. And like I said, we do have a couple of starters if we need them, but hoping we could get a kind of a starter question from the group. There's one. All right. Thanks, Rob. Any ideas on keeping players and parents engaged via virtual training? Certainly. I think that's a great question. A lot of people have been coming to us with, ideas or questions on that. We're helping some people through that. I know there's some other, a few tools out there that I've heard people using. So I'm going to actually ask you, Gabe, do you want to take a shot at, kind of what you're seeing and hearing? I know you've talked to a lot of club directors who are trying to, they're paying coaches right now in a lot of cases, and they're trying to keep them active. What are they doing?
Yeah, so I think super important for clubs to be, keeping the kids engaged while they're not with you guys face to face, and important for the kids because it gives them, they keep improving and you guys get feedback on how the kids are doing. It also gives the parents a little break because pretty much everybody in the U.S. right now is at home. Then the kids are there with their parents. Gives you guys a couple different tools too that I can talk about later as far as, making sure that you can keep going for your seasons and not have everything just stop dead. But there's some nice options that I've helped some clubs work around in looking at what a kid can do at home. So with whatever tools they've got, maybe no tools at all, just using body weight things. So doing, burpees and some sprints and doing some, maybe jumping jacks or different drills related to the activities that your sport requires. And then a couple things around those, either having the parents score the kids and how they're doing, time them on some of the drills, or video them. We rolled out some video tools for secure video. So the parents could potentially video the kids while they're doing these remote things. And then in turnaround, the coach could log into TeamGenius, see the video of how those kids are doing, and then either give them written out feedback or turn around and do, a selfie style video on the TeamGenius app. And the coach can then send out video feedback of how how the player did when they're doing their training at home. I've seen that paired with a lot of things. There's a lot of training tools out there, right? So either you guys can create your own content, which I've given some clubs some ideas how to create their own content, or a lot of tools out there that you guys can subscribe to or pay to that have content that they can then go and, send the kids out to and do those things. I think what's missing from a lot of the ones I've looked at, then the ability to have that real-time feedback where the coaches can see what the kids are doing, and then the other way around where the coaches can give feedback one-on-one to the players and parents.
Thanks, Gabe. Yeah, and I'm seeing a couple of questions. Yeah, so Carol about, how would a parent upload the video into TeamGenius? And Gabe, we're just having parents, and I want to be clear here too. TeamGenius, of course, it wasn't designed for this kind of remote training scenario. So I'm not, we're not here to tell you like, hey, TeamGenius can do whatever you want. We've had some people who are saying, hey, I already have this tool that I like. I might as well see if I can use it for a different use case during this time. And it's certainly doable. Dave, do you want to describe the process of kind of how they're doing that with, just the logistics of setting that up? And we'll keep it brief because we know we have some people on here who are not customers. So don't want to, belabor a product specific question for long.
Yeah. So really, just setting up in TeamGenius, for example, you can kind of see my device here. I've got some different skills that I set up. The parent would essentially just log in. We create an assessment with you guys, get an access key. They log in, find their kid. Go in, and then we have the ability to just take video. So they would go into the TeamGenius app and then take video of whatever their player is going to be doing. So log in, take the video, it uploads to the cloud, and then the coach can see that on the back end through the different permissions that you can use for access inside of TeamGenius.
Yeah, and Carol, also I should point out, I'm not sure if you guys have video on your account, but we should talk about that. It's something we're just trying to be helpful for people right now. It's in our pro tier plan, but we could offer that to you for free. We're trying to get, we want people using it. We're trying to help out where we can. So it's a simple feature we can turn on for you. So yes, sounds like you'll get in touch with Gabe and Rob. I know Gabe recorded a quick video walkthrough of how to do this as well. So we'll have Gabe get in touch with you as well about how you might be able to do it with TeamGenius. Outside of TeamGenius, I know, we've seen people. I saw a comment about Techni Football from Brian. I know I've heard of that one. I'm less familiar with it. I know I've seen Famer. If anyone's seen Famer, it's it's basically, I think the club creates their own sort of video content library, and then they distribute that through the tool. I know there's a couple organizations who I've seen using that right now. Of course, Tapia, we hear a little bit about from people doing more like competitions. I think that's a good thing to think of too, is if you're trying to keep people busy and players, just straight up doing, juggling a ball in place for a long period of time is probably not going to keep them super engaged. But I think we've seen a lot come up with, creative competitions. I saw even like Positive Coaching Alliance had sort of a competition where you, I don't know if it was a competition exactly, but writing a letter to your sport about how you miss your sport, just things like that. So I think it's a time to get creative if you can, and if you can create any sort of, gamification of it, of, do this drill until you get X number of times in a row, or, create competitions, things like that, I think would keep kids engaged a little bit more than just, straight, here's a drill to do. So that's just my 2 cents there. Ruth, do you have anything to add to that before we?
It's interesting. Rob just posted about doing some social media stuff, the esports. The state of Washington Youth Soccer actually, since it can't do State Cup right now, is doing a statewide esports State Cup, if you will, similar to a FIFA kind of tournament, to try to sort of substitute for the fact that normally we'd be doing State Cup right now here. And I think it was so popular they had to add divisions and brackets. It was bigger than they thought it would be.
That's cool. What about, and this is just off the top of my head, what about coaches? I mean, we talk about, sending stuff to the players to do. Is there anything, I want this to be open to anybody, so please chat, raise your hand if you want to chime in on anything. But I was just thinking, what do you have the coaches doing right now? I've heard a few examples of clubs trying to have their coaches do like, a weekly video call with each player, talk about, I think they like that because it's also an opportunity to just like, be that kind of that role model of like asking, how the player's doing and how the family is and things like that, that create that personal connection outside of sport, along with giving them any sort of, feedback on what they're doing or plans. Is there anything else, have Gabe or Ruth, you guys heard of people asking of their coaches right now?
I know of a number of clubs that are now doing coaches meetings online because that's the only way you can do them. Interestingly enough, Gabe and I talked to someone not long ago, like maybe last hour, who said he had a coaches meeting and for the first time ever, he had 100% participation, that he actually got more participation online than when he does it in person. And he was really pleased with that. The other piece was he was able to, he pays his coaches, but it's all a second job for his coaches, and they're able to give them half pay for April as they do things with their kids online and remotely. So he's been able to have them work some and have some income, and that's been very well received.
Great. Yeah, I've seen a couple. Rob, mid-season evaluations through TeamGenius. I'm glad someone said that and we didn't have to. But no, I mean, that's something, right? Your coaches are home. I've heard of people asking coaches to even review past game film and video footage of players and do an evaluation using that. In the scenario Gabe shared, you'd actually maybe have the player do those drills and then get, specific feedback on that. But I think that's a good idea, of course. So Rob, giving coaches different topics each week to create content. I think that's the key. I mean, look, it's exactly what we're doing, right? We're trying to, bring this group together, do webinars. We're trying to create content to, help people in your position running these organizations through this. And I think in most cases, the very little formality is required here. It's really just about, keeping in touch with people, keeping people engaged in the game and your coaches engaged. And there's really not a lot that you can't do, through simple web meetings like this. So
one of the things that
yeah,
I've seen, I was going to say, one of the things I've seen some clubs doing is if you've got coaches, either staff or not, you have them record videos of doing some of these drills, right? To go into the kids being able to do stuff at home. And then you can host them different places, but having, the coaches do, I see somebody doing Facebook Live drills, do drills that way, or do drills, and record them with your iPhone and host them unlisted on YouTube. And then you can send those out to your players to do as things that they're doing at home. And that's one of the ways to definitely do that. One club I was talking to is trying to pivot a little bit from, they're thinking their season might be too delayed, and they might do something like kind of remote personal training from the coaches, at least their paid coaches, to keep all the parents really, really engaged, and doing something, using some video tools and feedback to do something to that effect. So
there's a club out here, and their coaching staff's average age was younger, shall we say. And so every day they post something, but it's one of their coaches doing some sort of activity, some sort of challenge. And it's sort of like, can you beat your coach? And so the coach will juggle something crazy and record himself, herself. And then the kids have to, can we do better than the coach does?
Juggling TP seems like a popular one right now.
Yeah, well, the one I saw was the coach only hit it like 4 or 5 times, and he was in an apartment building, and it went over the side of his little balcony thing, and he's like, oh, this is not good. And his kids ate it up. It's like, we can beat 5 for the coach. And they had a lot of fun that day.
Great. Well, cool. I think, a pretty good start on that topic. Anyone want to suggest another topic or question? Again, throw it in the chat, raise your hand. Otherwise, I've got a couple, we could throw out a couple ideas too. So I'll give you a minute here, and then we can jump off our list if we need to. All right, I'm going to suggest one here. I think, this one was submitted ahead of time. We forgot to put a name or anything on the forum, so we're not sure who actually asked it, but this one came up on our webinar too in some flavor, but it's the idea of, paying staff when the revenue stream is stalled. And so, yeah, I mean, this is a tough one. Rather than, give any thoughts on that right now, maybe from the team, does anyone on the call want to throw an idea in the chat? Like, what are you guys doing right now? I mean, I know a lot of clubs have their coaches or staff are on contracts, they're contractors versus employees, which has some stipulations. Have you had to let people go already? Yeah. So yeah, Ruth, thanks. How are you compensating the coaches right now? All right, Gary, I'm going to open up here, allow to talk. We should be able to hear, it looks like you're maybe self-muted. There we go.
Okay. Yeah, so we are on hold right now in Iowa until April 16th. And so we have not refunded any of our club members because we're hopeful and optimistic that we'll have some kind of spring/summer or even a summer season. So based upon that, is we agreed to continue paying our coaches up through April 16th, and then obviously we'll reevaluate.
Gary, I think we just missed the end of that. I think right at reevaluate, I think we lost you.
Come April 16th on knowing how much of a season or seasons we're going to have. So now we have the opportunity to have the coaches engage more with the teams. So, for example, we do have Techni football. We had that previously, so we're in a good position there. But we feel that we can have greater impact if the coaches are actually connecting with their teams versus the club connecting with the players club-wide. So there's more of that personal contact. And then we're obviously going to wrench up as far as the virtual coaching education that we have. So we're really kind of changing the way that we can still develop coaches and develop players. We're just doing it a little bit more virtually than obviously anybody anticipated.
Oh, wow. Jacob's in a state where they've got, I can't remember, was it a law or a court ruling around the concept of coaches as employees rather than independent contractors, and that's changed how a lot of folks in California have had to do business.
Right. I don't know a ton about that specifically, but I know, of course, with contractors, you know, you have to be careful about, you know, telling them, you know, how or when to work, things like that. And then I did hear, I was on the League Apps webinar yesterday. They did one on some financial management stuff during this time. And, you know, they were talking about, you know, maybe having to reclassify some of those contractors as part-time employees. And I didn't really catch the reason specifically for that, but yeah, super interesting.
There are a number of states, as well as the IRS, who, depending on where you are, have been doing reviews of different, the referees have had to deal with this in soccer as well. Are they independent contractors, or are they really W-2 employees? And so there are a lot of folks, I think, who are in that transition of making folks W-2s. But it's, yeah, the leads to audit lead referrals, yeah, and clubs really love those. The dilemma with unemployment is if you're a 1099, if you're a contractor, you typically aren't eligible for unemployment.
Right.
And so if you're in that category right now, it's much easier for a soccer club to let you go, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a tough situation. I'm going to jump back to something, Rob, you mentioned, you know,
yes.
Paying coaches, you know, fully, but asking them, you know, really requiring the things you've asked of them for the remote training and evaluations and whatever else. Yeah, I mean, really, that's it, right? How do you, if you've collected dues already for a full year, you've got to justify those. So, what is everyone hearing generally from, you know, parents right now? Is there, you know, obviously everyone's had some requests, I would imagine, for, you know, refunds or some of those kinds of things, but has the, you know, I know a lot of times it can be the exception, you know, the person who screams loudest, who kind of controls your view of this, but has it been largely positive with what you're doing virtually and, you know, hanging on to fees, but trying to create value? Is that, anyone have any insight on that? Oh, and before I jump to that, so yeah, Steve, in the new stimulus bill, the independent contractors are covered by unemployment insurance. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, that's very good to hear, I think. So I just threw out the question about parents. If, you know, if it's not a good one or not anyone we need to jump into, totally fine. Yeah. Yeah. So not heard much. Yeah. I mean, you're providing value, and that's great. That's, I think, what you have to be doing right now. And then, you know, still hanging on to hope of a spring season, which I don't know if that will happen, if there's much hope of that everywhere, but I think a lot of the country is still hopeful. And then we have, let's see. Cool. Yeah.
So when you think about being optimistic, are you at a dead stop, or how much time would it take to get up? Gabe and I were talking to a club earlier today, and the gentleman was saying he's all by himself when he goes out on the field, but he has such a large field complex. It's grass fields, but he's got to keep them lined. He's got to keep them up, because if somebody said, we're kicking off the season in a week, he needs time to actually make sure those fields are ready. So what's that ramp up time for people?
Yeah, kind of idea too is how you guys are preparing for day one of this season, whenever that happens, as far as when you can get outside and do stuff. Talked to some big organizations that are planning on just, getting everything ready for going live whenever that happens, and how fast you guys can be ready to just hit the field and go when everybody can be out on the field.
Yeah. So public fields, the parks departments or the schools are keeping those up. Have there been other strategies?
I know for stuff, one thing going forward that I've heard from one club I've talked to, or actually a couple, is that they're definitely going to keep implementing the online meetings and trainings for their coaches, because they're, like Ruth said, the other one is that they're getting all the coaches that come to all these things. So it seems like that's going to be something that's going to stick around, is getting people to online things instead of showing up in person, so that they can be flexible, where you can jump into a meeting on your phone or your computer or wherever you are, but everybody's in there actually doing, at the meetings. So.
Yeah, saying that might stick a little more even after all this, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Jacobs.
Yeah. So so it sounds like there's a bit of a spectrum here, in terms of ramp up time. In Rob's area, things are largely ready to go and being maintained, but then, for Greg, it's all closed up and on hold. So I would imagine there's a bit longer ramp time there. Bobby at 1 week. Yeah. I mean, on the bright side, giving those fields some time to regenerate a little bit, probably not such a bad thing. So yeah, Jacob, I want to jump back to your question. So has there been any strategies to put in place with other clubs to make them stronger when this ends? So better governance, budget planning, marketing. I think what Gabe just mentioned is probably an example of that. I think, you really start looking at, most people do prefer in person when they can, but at the same time, I would imagine there might be a little more, comfort with web meetings like we're doing right now, and a much more, consistent use, and, people might stick with that, I would imagine. Not necessarily a policy thing, but I think that's just going to kind of be a cultural change. I'm really curious if others have thoughts on this. So governance, budget planning, marketing, what practices, policies, processes, things like that might change or improve as a result of going through this?
If anybody wants to do it, raise your hand and we can put you on audio too, so you can speak to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not so big that we can't talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
My sense is right now there are a lot of clubs that are sort of stunned might be too strong a word, but noticing, did they have reserves or not? And so the flexibility to react and to buffer really kind of depends on, were they savers or spenders? But in a lot of places, the delays are only measured in a week or two instead of months. And so I'm not sure, I haven't been seeing a lot of strategies around what Jacob is talking about in terms of making clubs stronger, in that I'm not sure that folks have come to terms with that this probably isn't like a 2-week shutdown. And I say that being somebody who lives north of Seattle, Washington, in the county where they found the first cases of the virus. So we're a little ahead in the, oh my gosh, category.
Yeah, Bobby, I'm gonna open that up here so you can join us. Hey, Bobby.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we got you.
Awesome. Yeah. So just to kind of talk about, policy and governance and any expenses and budgets and stuff. I have been really lucky to receive mentorship from a great club president down here in Louisiana who always took an extremely conservative approach to budgeting, but for also keeping surplus in the bank in case, we're in Louisiana, so there's always a chance of a tornado coming through during certain seasons or hurricanes during hurricane season. So we've always been wary of a natural disaster from day one, really. And I think what this is actually going to do for clubs and, other nonprofits in the future is to, I think it's going to help them be more conservative with the way that they are spending and make them question, why are we spending that? Just because we have the money, I don't think is a good enough reason for spending. So I definitely think it's going to bring a new approach, and it's going to make people definitely become more conservative because, nobody wants to go through this again.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I'll just add, I'm the co-founder and CEO of TeamGenius, and, our job is very much related to that. I mean, my job is to make sure, the team kind of balances. We spend money on the resources and the tools we need, Zoom video conference subscription. There's some just really clear things that you need to buy and need to pay for. Certainly there are nice to haves as well that we spend money on, but we're always kind of looking at that trade-off. If we spend money on this now and it doesn't help us grow, or it doesn't help us, serve our customers better or whatever, it potentially shortens the runway, right? It shortens the amount of reserve we have if we have a bad month and we don't sell, or something like this happens. I mean, honestly, we've only brought on, I think, 1 or 2 new customers since all this hit, a week and a half ago. And after one of the best start to the year we've ever had as a company. So, it's really no different, right? We're talking about small businesses trying to survive through something like this. And I think you're exactly right. It's going to kind of force everyone to think about it a little bit differently.
Yeah. So Jacob's got sort of an add-on to his question, which comes off of what you were talking about, in terms of treading water, or, some organizations might not make it. But his question about thinking, is it a nonprofit or a for-profit kind of approach? I debate this a lot with some of my colleagues, in that I'm not convinced that the structure is what helps you or saves you or sinks you. I actually think of youth sports, not just soccer, but all youth sports, as a 3-pronged stool. So, if you got a stool, you've got your athletes sitting on the stool, and you've got coaching, and you've got governance, and you've got your operations or your administration. And those things need to be in balance. They don't need to be exactly the same size or exactly the same proportion of your budget, but those functions of work in the sport and your coaches, the governance, which is either your owners or your board of directors, and then day-to-day operations, fields, uniforms, budget, paying the bills. And whether you're for-profit or nonprofit isn't as important. In my opinion, it's not as important as, are all 3 legs of the stool covered and working well? So you can have, great boards of directors and have an organization that works well. You can have a board of directors made up of crazy parents and it doesn't work well. But the governance skill still has to live either in your board or in your owner. If your owner doesn't know how to run the organization, you're ending up with, a similar headache as if you have a board of directors that doesn't understand their role. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the 3-chair prong too. I was thinking, and you're saying it doesn't necessarily have, it could be a crooked stool. If you emphasize those different things separately, they're different proportion. But
right.
I like the.
And I will say, I actually didn't dream that up. It comes from Bobby Howe, who used to be the director of coaching for U.S. Soccer, and he lets me steal it on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, that's great.
No, and that's where that comes from. Ooh, Rob's got some good ideas.
Yeah. So for anyone on the call who's not familiar with, of course, we're using Zoom right now, so you're probably understanding that. Right now, we're actually using the webinar side of Zoom. They also have just a standard meeting, which is mostly similar. The free version gets you up to a 40-minute meeting, and you can't record, I don't believe. And then it sounds like the nonprofit paid upgrade would get you, full recording and everything. And then Slack, if you're not familiar, really popular chat tool. We've been using it since almost day one of our company, and we don't email each other, almost never in our internal. We've got 11 employees. We don't email at all. It's all Slack, and you have really good kind of channel specific categories to group conversations, and you can have notification settings by channel. So it's like, don't alert me if somebody posts here, but if it posts in this channel or it's this person, I want to see it right away. So it's really, really great. And the free version lets you search for, I think it saves up to 2,000 messages across the organization that are searchable. And then once you unlock the paid version, you get more like video conferencing through Slack, actually, which we use sometimes. And then you also get your entire message history as searchable, which, we just upgraded to the paid version. And I'm just sharing that because, that's kind of the differences. And if you can get that first kind of paid tier for free or very cheap as a nonprofit, that's definitely something I would recommend.
But the TechSoup.com, if you have technology needs and you're a nonprofit, check that one out. They can help you out. They can help you save money.
Again, if anybody wants to talk in person, hit the raise your hand thing and we can give you the audio ability. I think one thing that's going to come up too is more and more is whatever tool you guys use is, if there's going to be a lack of funds because the season's getting to later thing, I think that fundraising and fundraising in a traditional sense, as in getting donations from people and sponsorship and getting, money in the door is going to get important this year too. So, if anybody has more ideas on that kind of stuff, or we have some ideas too on, fundraising and getting sponsorship from companies, because that's going to be a big thing. And reaching out to those now too. I don't know how people are feeling as far as places they would normally go to get revenue opportunities. So reaching out to the local businesses that, may not be open right now either, how that kind of stuff is going.
Yeah, I would imagine that's tough right now, but I think I think this is a good time to look at those things and look at those processes in your operations and governance, as Ruth mentioned. And I think when I'm an optimist, so I get excited about getting on the other side of this, and am hopeful that things recover very quickly, a little bit different than a real financial meltdown of the pandemic. It's kind of there's so much uncertainty, but I'm hopeful that when we get on the other side of this, whenever that is, that things pick up quite quickly. And could be wrong, but that's what I choose to believe, and I actually do believe so.
I keep thinking about some of these things, is like say you're a club, a mid-size or small club, and you've got local grocery stores. Well, most of the grocery stores are blowing it up right now. I mean, they're doing crazy business. We reach out and say, hey, we got this club, and we're looking to have some organizations that want to run a flyer in our emails we send out to people or something. It might be a good time for that.
I think the other opportunity, I mean, once we all learn, Zoom and GoToMeeting and WebEx and whatever online tool you love, it a lot of clubs, when we get that busy thing, right? Because we've got training Monday through Friday, we have games on the weekends, we've got people who they can't tell you what their day off is because they're on the field every day. To slow down enough, I mean, now we sort of got quiet time imposed on us to actually do the thinking about your strategic planning, how you would staff in a more perfect world. I was on a webinar this morning. I was joking with Chris. This is my 5th one today. But we were talking about scenario planning, and normally a strategic plan, you're really planning for 1, maybe 2 scenarios. And one of the unnerving things right now is we're doing strategic planning and scenario planning, and we're actually having to guess about multiple scenarios. We're actually having to duplicate the planning because we don't exactly know when spring season or summer season is going to happen. And so there's a lot of what ifs going on. But the gift of the current chaos is there's actually a little more time to think about that, talk about that, and spend some time on governance and operations that we rarely make time for. I mean, it's more fun to work with the kids and the coaches on the field, right? Going to meetings isn't in our top 3 things we like to do. But it is an opportunity to kind of think through that and look at budgets and priorities and what we really want to accomplish. So that might be a piece of the silver lining.
Certainly. All right, we are I think, in need of another topic here. Staff, we covered that. All right, Ruth, I'm going to ask you one because you mentioned it earlier.
Uh-oh.
Kind of following up on, and I should have looked, but I'm not sure how many of this group was actually on the webinar the other day. But, we shared a bit about, tryouts and how to potentially kick that off. And then the Q&A kind of was sort of like what we're doing now. The questions were really across the board in a good way. It was fun to see that. Curious if that's a topic that this group has. Maybe you've exhausted this topic. What happened. But Ruth, you had asked, kind of like what are you going to do? and of course, there's probably, I would imagine, most are probably on hold still until they understand what their season's going to look like, if anything. But has anyone made a decision, or is anyone who was on the webinar, did it change maybe how you might be thinking about that this year?
Yeah. So for those of you on the webinar, you've had 3 or 4 days to think about some of the stuff we talked about. How has your thinking changed about tryouts and forming teams and what your options are? Still holding out and hoping we can hold on to them. Yeah. Yeah, my fear is that we could lose kids from sport altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've talked a lot about that, Ruth. Yeah.
I know I've talked to some clubs that are doing things where they're trying to use, some of the mid or end of season evals to get ideas of what they're going to form for teams. Some of the clubs have guaranteed kids that were there last year. They don't know what team they're going to be on, but send out, essentially a guarantee letter that they're going to have a spot for them on the club this year, and then continuing what they're doing with that guarantee that the kid's going to be there, and then put them on the team as soon as everything gets rolling.
My guess is that they're parents that are worried that, will there be a place for my child to play in some places?
I see, Bobby, I see your hand up. I'm not sure if that was from the last time, but your You're ready to rock if you did have something to say. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just wanted to hop on the back of what Ruth said, about this is a really worrying time to kind of lose kids from all sports, not just soccer, which is what I'm a part of.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think right now that this is really a good moment for I was listening to a League Apps webinar yesterday, and a few of the people on that webinar, they said things like great organizations never waste a crisis. They also said stuff like, how can we take this time to improve? Out of necessity comes progress, and we survive to thrive. I think this is a moment where any sport out there who really wants to grab a hold of the youth's attention, they can capture many minds and many hearts just by putting family orientated content out there, regardless of what sport you're from. And I think that can kind of then be a push for, what the true value of youth sport is about. And that's pushing the family oriented content of how they can all bond over, the organization that they're no longer socially affiliated to.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody that there's connection and we've lost physical connection, but that doesn't mean we have to lose all connection, but also that continuity that the club remains a part of my life. The team remains a part of my life in a little different way in the short time, but it's not this clean total break thing. There's still a connection. And when you think about how much time our kids actually spend with our coaches, we've got parents, we've got teachers, we've got coaches, and they're in the top 3 adults that our kids spend a whole lot of time with. And losing that connection is actually really hard on kids.
Mm-hmm.
So finding ways to stay connected, even though it's not on the court, on the ice, on the field, is really actually important for our kids and our families, just, mentally and socially, not just physically.
Yeah, kind of funny. Actually, that made me think of my first thought there was like, obviously you want the kids active as much as possible, but the esports thing has been kind of fun to see. Just people like, clubs organizing, tournaments and, FIFA matches and stuff like that with players and coaches and such. And I was thinking, to the point about, the opportunity to kind of change some behavior. So I play a little bit of PlayStation 4, not a huge gamer, but I like to play a little bit here and there. And my wife usually kind of rolls her eyes at me when I play, she's like, oh, you nerd, whatever. And but now that we're both stuck home and, a couple of days ago, I was like, hey, I got a couple of games that I think you might actually play with me. And we fired it up and played a couple of games and she's loving it. So just a little anecdote that kind of, I think, proves the point that you do have an opportunity here to capture hearts and minds, as you said, and, try something a little different, get people engaged in a different way, and really kind of, win those relationships for the long term.
Yeah. Different kinds of connections. And the interesting thing is on the other side, that actually gives us more options for retaining connection. So like the director of coaching who said, I had a Zoom meeting and 100% of my coaches showed up. He can keep that and he can still do things in person going forward. So he's actually added to his options for working with people and connecting with people. So he will be better off in the long run, even though right now it's, not optimal and not necessarily comfortable.
Great. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left on the call. Also, I want to be clear, this is meant to be open. So like, if you got to go or you're not getting anything out of it or whatever, by all means, it's not rude to drop. But I did want to just give us maybe one more topic if we can. Does anyone have One more topic to cover. We'll maybe give it, 30 seconds here. Otherwise, I think we can wrap up. But please, if you have an idea or anything you're curious about, or you have a comment or a story from your club that you'd be willing to share, really fair game here. Yeah, Steve, I'm going to open you up.
Can you hear me, Chris?
Steven, you with us? Yeah, we got you.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I had to tune out for a little bit earlier to take a phone call, and I'm not sure if it got covered, but did you guys talk at all about, as club directors, making sure that people take a look at what's in this new stimulus bill as quickly as possible?
Not specifically, no. I know you mentioned about the contractors, but I'm looking at it, of course, pretty closely as a business owner. But do you have any thoughts, Steve, or anything that you've kind of looked at right away, or is it just kind of encouragement to look at it?
Well, no, I actually sat on a really good webinar on it's actually Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon by a guy that specifically works in small business loan consulting. And he kind of walked through it. And this was even as it was still just coming out of the Senate and going into the House, in terms of what it generally meant. And as a small business owner, I would highly recommend that anybody that has people that work for them, or even if you're an independent contractor, take a look at it, talk to your accountant, and find out what it means. It's still going to be 2 to 3 weeks before it all gets sorted out and kind of starts to hit the road where we can do anything about it. But after having listened to this seminar and I got it out and read through it, not the whole thing, it's 880 pages. It's just crazy. But I did read through it on some of the things that are specific to small businesses. And the payroll protection program is something that there's going to be a formula they take where you submit basically a month's worth of payroll. And that payroll can include W-2 and independent contractors. And then they take a formula and multiply it by 2.5. So if, let's say you have $20,000 in payroll, they'll give you $50,000 initially as a small business administration loan. But the big piece of that is then they turn around sometime down the road and they look back and audit you and say, okay, what did you actually spend the money on? And if you show, I spent it on payroll, I spent it on utilities, I spent it on mortgage or rent, and a few other categories, they will, if you show them you did spend that $50,000 on that, they basically write off the loan and it's forgiven and you owe zero. So it's almost free money. If you don't, it then rolls into a 10-year loan at 4% that you can pay off at any time. So from a small business perspective, the reason they're calling it the payroll protection program is because they want companies to keep people on payroll and continue to pay them for this next 2 to 2.5 months while this all kind of works itself out. So obviously as a small business owner, and we've got 150 teams that we manage and coaches all over the place. The fact that it, for the first time in a sense ever, included independent contractors was a big piece for us. And if you know people that are independent contractors on their own, they can actually apply for this kind of loan themselves. Again, I'm not an expert by any means. I would go contact your either accountant or find another webinar that deals with this. But I was really fascinated in terms of what kind of small business relief it will actually offer to small companies. So if you are a small business owner, whether you're 2 people or 20 people, I would try to get as up to date with it and understand what it is. So as you're making decisions about, do I have to lay people off or furlough them or put them half time, this could weigh into that in terms of what you could do for them.
Yeah, that was, I got to say, Stephen, I've been reading a lot about this. I've seen a couple of things, couple of videos. That was actually the most clear explanation I've heard of that piece of it. So thank you for jumping in. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, even for us, I've been kind of looking at this and saying, wow, if they're going to relieve, payroll taxes and rent and things like that, I mean, that's really significant money. I mean, that's a big difference for a small business. So this could be a really, really helpful kind of game-changing bill for everyone. I mean, I think that's the point too. So, but thank you. That was great.
Yeah, well, anybody who can condense 880 pages into that paragraph is brilliant.
Yep.
Thank you for coming, Carol.
Thanks, Carol.
Nothing. Some lady that just Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Nope, that was it. I was all set.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, thank you. I'm going to hit mute on you then. Great. Anyone else? Any final questions, comments? Did you like this kind of thing? Like I said, we're kind of experimenting here. We're just trying this. I think we'll do more of them just by, I thought this was useful for me to think through these ideas, and hopefully you got something out of it as well. So pop in the chat if you have any final comments. Otherwise, we'll just give it a minute here, and then I'll shut down the room. Awesome. Thanks for the comment, Rob. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. Thanks for contributing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Thanks, Bobby. You're very welcome. Thanks for joining. Thanks for commenting. And Gary, thanks for coming. Jacob, I know you had a couple comments. Thank you. All right. I think we're going to shut her down. Thank you, everyone. We'll be doing another one. So, yep. Have a great weekend. Take care.